fixed on. The day of the Lord. Zephaniah calls it in Zephaniah 1, 14 to 18, the great day of the Lord, a day of wrath, of trouble and distress, the day of the Lord's wrath. So you can check these in your spare time. Listen to this one now. Jeremiah 37 calls it the great day, the time of Jacob's trouble. And Isaiah 24 calls it the curse shall devour the earth. So you can check those references when you have time. New Testament writers have quoted from or made reference to these Old Testament descriptions. John the Revelator in Revelation 7:14 uses the term the Great Tribulation, and he's quoting Daniel 12:1. Don't forget that the King James translators translate that wrong. They say a great tribulation. The Greek gives the double definitive, the tribulation, the great. Paul in 1 Thessalonians 5:2 calls it the day of the Lord. And Peter in 2 Peter 3 calls it the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord will come. Moving on now. The time of trouble such as never was, also called the day of Yahweh, or the great day of the Lord, or the day of wrath, or the great tribulation, will, get these points in, because I'm going to give you a quiz on this section later on, will, 1, commence at the close of probation. When will the time of trouble such as never was begin? At the close of probation. 2, cover the entire period of the 7 last plagues. And when will it end? At the second coming of Christ. That's the time of trouble such as never was. It starts at the close of probation, covers the entire period of the 7 last plagues, and it will end at the second coming of Christ. The time of trouble such as never was. Some commentators, from as early as Miller, from as early as Andrews, have used the term history's final year. And by that, they do not mean that it is necessarily going to be 12 months. If you tell somebody, well, you're in the final year of your life, doesn't mean the person may have exactly 12 months. It means within that, within the year, or just over the year approximately, something may happen. So some of the early commentators use the term history's final year. Now, we come to an important point. I'm sure you all can prove this from the Spirit of Prophecy, but we need to prove these things from the Bible and Bible alone. Next paragraph. But Jeremiah 37 mentions the time of Jacob's trouble. What does Jeremiah say? Alas, for the day is great. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be delivered out of it. Before that, he said he saw men with their hands on their loins as if in labor. Men in labor. You know, the women claim that since they alone get babies, women use this false argument. Since they get babies, they can bear more pain than men. You know, that argument is false. Only women can get babies. So you can't use women getting babies to deal with pain. You have to let both bear, for example, a kidney stone passing down. Let both bear that and see who can bear. Okay? So the argument that I get babies so I can bear more pain than you has been thrown in the sea ever since. As a matter of fact, this is what Jesus says. When a woman gets a man-child and looketh down, in those days they used to get children the right way. Stooping and the baby, gravity pull it down. You don't have to slap the baby. When the baby hit, it would cry and everything be all right. So when the baby was born, Jesus says the woman will look down and straightway forgetteth the pain because she have given birth to a man-child. So that kind of pain is what we call sweet pain. Cannot be used to compare. So the women looking at me real vexed. I bring these stories because the moment I get into these stories, everybody's awake. Everybody. Okay? Good. All right. But Jeremiah said he saw men in labor. Well, men in labor. And he asked the angel, what is this, men in labor? The angel said, it is the time of Jacob's trouble. Alas, for that day is great. But the promise comes, he, Jacob, who is now Israel, shall be delivered out of it. So it is the question now. Question. Same paragraph. We want to find out if the time of Jacob's trouble starts and ends with the time of trouble such as never was, or if it has a different start and a different end to that great time of trouble. You understand the question I'm asking? We know that the great time of trouble begins at probation's closure and ends at the second coming of Christ and covers the entire period of the 7 last plagues. The time of Jacob's trouble, no, don't. Immediately you should be thinking, the great time of trouble is the great time of trouble. But the time of Jacob's trouble is the time of Jacob's trouble. Are you with me? Jacob's trouble. Who is Jacob at this time? The 144,000. The 144,000, I just jumping ahead, we'll come to that in due course, is Jacob. So there's a special trouble for Jacob over and above the great time of trouble, which is especially for the wicked. So we want to find out if Jacob's trouble covers the same length of duration as the great time of trouble, or if it starts differently and ends differently. And I think all of us should know the proof from the spirit of prophecy, but we have to prove these things from the Bible and Bible alone. So let's go. Next paragraph. It is easier to determine when the time of Jacob's trouble will end. It ends with the deliverance of God's people. Back to Daniel 12:1. And at that time, thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. So the people who will be delivered must have had their names retained in the book of life at the end of the investigative judgment. Sins blotted out, names retained. And once your name is retained, you're going to be delivered according to Daniel 12:1. All right. By the way, the prophet Joel, next paragraph, this deliverance was also prophesied by Joel in Joel 2:32. Read Joel 2:32. Joel 2:32. Joel 2:32 talks about this deliverance. Joel 2:32. You found it, Brother Steve? Joel 2:32. Everybody has it? Get the context. It is the great and terrible day of the Lord, because, listen to the context. Verse 31. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and the terrible day of the Lord come. Once that day comes now, verse 32, and it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. So this is a final day text. This is a remnant text. This is the text that applies to the great time of trouble. And once your name, Daniel says, is in the book. And listen, the people of God won't have any thoughts in their mind about book or anything, so they'll be just hollowing out and crying in despair. So Joel says they'll be calling upon the Lord. Daniel says their name will be in the book. And the promise is, from both passages, they will be delivered. Let's look at this actually now in Revelation 16:17. Revelation 16:17 now will be the fulfillment of Daniel 12:1 and Joel 2:32. The voice of God delivering the remnant from the time of Jacob's trouble. Revelation 16:17. Revelation 16:17. Now, a lot of different Adventist groups have different theories now on the end time events, especially after probation closure, and we want to tighten it up and make sure that we are solidly based on Scripture and the spirit of prophecy, and seal off that as a doctrine that cannot be touched. Because by the time probation closes, all the truths that God has given us must be sealed off in us. If a man comes now and says he has light that Wednesday is the Sabbath, would that disturb you? You sure? But if a man comes now and says he has light that when Christ comes, so and so and so and so and so and so would happen, that'd be a little bit more nebulous. But every doctrine we have, we must be so sure of it that whoever comes, how does Ellen White define the seal of God? To be settled into the truth such that you cannot be made to move. Intellectually and experientially, such that you cannot be made to move. So if every wishy-washy doctrine that blow about the place, now you wobbling about, rambling. You can ramble on the roads, but don't ramble in doctrine. And by the way, now, the Lord has been good to me because my 2 last times of rambling, this is what happened. The house I stopped at to ask directions was the house I was looking for. Praise the Lord. New level. Revelation 16:17. Read it for us, someone. Loudly. Revelation 16:17. Steve, I thought you had it. The 7th angel poured out his vial into the air, and a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, "It is done." Whose voice is that, Father or Son? Whose voice is that, Father or Son? Sister Deborah is saying, "It is done." That's the Father's voice. Any other offers? All right, so that is up for grabs then? The jury's still out? Or there's another piece to research? We'll come back to that later on. Do your research and come back. Sister Deborah, you're fairly sure? Okay. Do your research and come back. All right. Revelation 16:17, the voice of God which came out of the temple saying it is done, delivers God's people. So we see that God's people will be delivered at the start of plague 7. That deliverance will end the time of Jacob's trouble. So we know when Jacob's trouble will end. It will end before the second coming of Christ. It will end at the start of plague 7 when the voice of God says it is done. So that's easy. So Jacob's trouble does not last as long as the great time of trouble. It ends before the great time of trouble. Now, we're going into a difficult area. Now, let us find out when the time of Jacob's trouble will commence. When will it begin? And there are a number of theories on this in Adventism, but the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy are clear. Let's go to the Bible first. Hope you follow this one. Revelation 16, we're going to read down. Revelation 16. Revelation 16. We're coming down the first 3 plagues. And I want you to reason carefully. 16, Revelation 16. Coming down the plagues. Let's go. Verse 2. And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worship his image. You can imagine the state of the world at that time. The various accident and emergency centers all around the world. You can imagine the state of the world. You can hear the authorities meeting and announcing these terrible emergencies and what can be done. Wow. Noisome. A grievous, a noisome and grievous sore. That means that this skin ulcer will be painful, inflamed, smelly, ugly. To look at it would be loathsome, and at the same time it is hurtful and painful. That means the integrity of the skin is breaking down as God withdraws. Now tell me something, they can't even keep If Satan's government can't even